All right, let's get into it. So it's important to remember that I have the Legendary Edition, which was available on Kickstarter, and I think is going to retail as well. But there are various kinds of Dungeon Saga Origins that are going to retail, so you will have to find out what ones are available to you. So not everything that is shown here will be available in every box. There is also some things that aren't shown here that are available. For example, terrain options that allow you to play with 3D pieces as models for things like furniture, but I haven't popped those in today. Now, first up, we've just got an example of a dungeon tile or two dungeon tiles. There's a line down here in the middle, and each dungeon tile will have a letter and number on the top, which will be important when it comes to setup. So, at the start of each dungeon, you will be told either via the book or the digital overlord, and I'll go into the digital overlord later on what tiles you will need to set up for that particular dungeon. And of course, most of these won't contain anything until you've opened doors to reveal them. The game comes with a really easy and nice quick start guide, which allows you to basically get rolling dice within minutes once you've unpacked it all. And it is enough to get you going. There is a fair bit that you will need to get from other sources, but it's enough to just play a nice, real basic version with the family if you want to. And in my edition, so it comes all editions will come with a rule book, and then it'll differ on what kind of expansions you have. So the Legendary Edition comes with 5 different quests, starting with the Trial of Tyranny, which is what myself and my friend Nick are playing with the aid of the Digital Overlord. Now, even in this one, we've played through 4. We're up to the 5th component of the quest, and we've already had 3-4 hours of gameplay at least, so you're going to get several hours out of each of these. In the Legendary Edition, there's this excellent little stand. That's the example of the back of it folded in there. So there's artwork all on the back of that. This is designed to go between the Overlord, if you have one, and any other players. And so the Overlord can quickly reference the rules. Or if you're just playing with the two of you or less and no Overlord, it's nice to have stand up and just be a nice quick reference sheet for various parts of the rules. Now I thought I'd show you uh, some examples of the models that you get in the box. Now, being a board style game, they're single piece plastic models. They are well integrated into the bases, so there'll be no easy deattachment of these from their bases. What I like about a lot of these models is the nice thick detail, and why I like that is because it means that painting, you'll be able to do some of those quick methods and get a pretty good result. So whether that be using contrast paints, a slap chop method, or even just painting with regular paints and a dry brush, I think the detail on these models will allow them to come up really nicely. Here's an example of the character card. So this is to go with the previous model, Rawdon. Down the right-hand side here, we have the basically what is the health bar. So you have a token start here, and it'll slide down if he's taking damage to the point of death. And then there's a revive token if you need to use it. The special rules are contained in the middle. Feats are listed at the bottom, but are contained on separate cards. Now, a feat is basically something you can perform once per dungeon, which tends to be a powerful attack or spell or something that you can do twice, something like that. On the left-hand side, we have the characteristics. So the top being their speed or movement characteristic, the next one down being the combat characteristic, the 2 arrows, their ranged characteristic, and the shield is their defense. We have Daenor the Wizard, I think that is, or one of the other wizard models. Olaf the Barbarian, again, nice big detail. I really love this dynamic model. Madriga, the elf, so one of the ranged options. A little bit of a mold line there, but those are easily removable and to be expected. And then we have some examples of the types of enemies you will encounter. So revenant dwarfs or undead dwarves, again, that nice thick detail. A skeleton, no blurry head in actual gameplay. A zombie. One little minor criticism I'd have is that there's not a great differentiation in the models, in my opinion, between the zombie and the armored zombie versions because they are different in the game. A ghost or a Nazgul, as I like to think of it. one of our Abyssal Dwarf variants, a Twilight Kin shooting enemy, an Undead Troll, and again another Twilight Kin boss character, and a Night Stalker Butcher. So all of these you can see integrated into the bases, big detail, will paint up quite nicely for your gaming experience. Not that I've done it yet. And then lastly, another example of Abyssal Dwarf. So in the Legendary Edition, I think came with Undead, Goblins, Abyssal Dwarves, and Twilight Kin. And generally those types will be confined to single dungeons, so you don't have to paint them all up at once. You can go through painting one set at a time, depending on what you're going to play. Throughout the game, various aspects of the gameplay are summarized on these cards, which are really excellent for being able to just have them there for a quick reference rather than needing to delve into the rulebook. And this is just an example of a board setup as per any kind of dungeon crawler. So you've got the generic tile all around here. This is a trap. If you were to have to walk on it or anywhere in line with that arrow, that would trigger the trap. As per this card, there's a nice quick reference sheet that tells you how to resolve that. We've got our enemy zombie there, rubble that blocks the way. Doors generally start closed, and if I was to walk up to it, I could then expend a point of movement to open the door, and then it would only be then actually that these contents were revealed, which are a couple of aspects of furniture. You can see blurred in the background a greeny other door. So in the game, you can either move and perform an action or perform an action and move. And an action will typically be exploring, fighting, casting a spell, something of that nature. You can't do more than one. So often you'll have to dedicate a character to exploring a hallway passage or a room before things like that are revealed. There's different types of cards, so the legendary item cards will often be discovered as you explore the dungeons. Equipment you might purchase or find throughout the dungeons. The exploration cards are typically what you draw when you perform an exploration action, and the AI Overlord will contain the monsters and things for the game. Now, I thought I'd go through a bit of what are the main mechanics in this game, which are primarily exploring and fighting. So I thought I'd go through the fighting and the shooting just to show you how simple and achievable it is to get this up and going, even with a young family. And so when it comes to fighting, we're using both cards here. So we're using the enemy card as well as the character card. Now, what we'll take note of on the enemy card is that it also has a combat characteristic, movement, and defense characteristic. It has any special rules here, and it has basically how many wounds it has. So it would take 2 wounds to kill. And of particular note is there'll be a keyword here, and in this case it's swarm. And so there'll be a quick reference card for swarms, which tell you that when it is the enemy's turn, which is usually after your characters have all exhausted their movement and action, how that enemy will behave. And it'll dictate, so it'll start with can it see you, then go through certain sections and tell you how it behaves, whether it's near or far. So that's really handy for getting that done quickly. But if Rawdon was to attack the zombie, what we're going to need is both the combat characteristics. So 4 for Rawdon and 2 for the zombie. And basically that means Rawdon's rolling 4 dice, the zombie's rolling 2. There's just another example here of the ghost, which is just a little different in that you can see it's a bit more resilient and hitty. So 3 combat dice and 3 defense dice. Different in that it can move through walls and squares, and also a different keyword here. But now let's go back to the combat with the zombie. So I said 4 versus 2 dice. So Rawdon rolls 4, the zombie rolls 2, and then we arrange them in descending order, much like the board game Risk, to see which dice defeat which. So that would be arranged like that. And so you can see my 6 would defeat the 5, my 5 would defeat the 1, the 5 would defeat the none, and the 1 would defeat the none. Now, in order to determine whether they cause damage, the first condition is, do I beat the opposite dice, which I do. And then the next condition is it more than the defense stat, which for the zombie was 1. So in this scenario, all 3 of those beat the opposite dice and were more than 1. So they would wound, whereas the 1 would not. And the zombie only had 2 damage, so it would be killed outright. If we then did that against the ghost, who's a bit more resilient, the ghost would have 3 dice to roll. And so I would roll my 4, the ghost 3. We line them up again. 6 to 5, 3 to 2, 3 to 1, and 3. So the first condition is that all of those have beat that. So if defense was irrelevant, then 4 of those would wound. But the ghost has an armor value of 3, and so none of these will wound. So I would have only performed 1 wound. It has a damage of 2, and so I will not kill that outright in that go. When it comes to shooting, an example of Madriga against the zombie, it is a similar mechanic. The zombie still uses the combat characteristic, but Madriga uses, or your ranged character will use their range characteristic. So again, it would be 4 versus 2. And so we roll the dice. Again, we arrange them in descending order, 5, 2, 1, 1. So you can see that neither of these two defeat the opposite. These don't have opposing dice, so they, in theory, would automatically wound, except for the fact they rolled 1s, which was equal to the defense characteristic of the zombie, and therefore this zombie does not take any damage at all. And so that's how simple the gameplay is, along with some other variations, of course, but it's basically at its core, it's as simple as that. Now, I wanted to touch on the Digital Overlord because this is such a good addition and is available to anyone that buys the game. And so you can just search for the Dungeon Saga Origins Digital Overlord. And it allows you to create an account and then create a campaign. You can see mine and Nick's there and our title. And then this is our current adventure, which is the Trial of Tyranny. And the little bit, the subsection that we're up to down the bottom. And so you can either track or play, and I'll just show you what's on the track screen. So this allows you to track the progress of your character throughout. So this is great for not having to use paper and pen. So gold, experience, and this is where we've got to after about 3 parts of the dungeon. And I think we've expended some of Rawdon's gold, but no experience at all yet. We've chosen not to cash that in. You can play the audio for the particular part of the campaign that you're in, so it'll read the preamble to the quest, which is cool. And then when you choose to play the next part, above this bit, because I'm scrolled down in this screenshot, there would be the preamble and the option to play the audio, and then it'll list the marauding monsters. So at each part of the dungeon, if you explore, there is a chance that marauding monsters appear, and so it tells you what those will be, so you can be prepared with the models. So it'll either be a skeleton warrior or skeleton archer. And then it also tells you how to lay out the tiles. And that's where those names come in. So you lay them out like that. Now, the next bit is when you choose to press start, it'll tell you exactly where the characters start, which way they're facing, where enemies are starting, which way they're facing for the bits of the dungeon that are already revealed. It'll have where to put terrain pieces. It'll have where to put rubble, so that's blocked off, and with the doors. And as you can see on the digital companion, the doors are closed, and that means that there is no visibility into here yet, so we can't see in here. So that will become revealed if we expend a movement point when we're next to the door to open the door, and then it'll show us what's inside. When we come into this space, we can choose one of our actions is to explore, and that would reveal typically what will pop up is something like draw an exploration card, but it might also tell you if there is something else in the vicinity, which may be something like a secret passage, and that'll automatically appear on the map. So this is a really cool addition to that allows you to play without having to dedicate someone to the Overlord position. And so that's just an example of what would pop up in the gameplay. Well, I hope you really enjoyed that simple run through of the gameplay of Dungeon Saga Origins. I'd really encourage people to buy it and give it a go. It's nice and simple, great way to get into a Mantic product. If you like this video, please give us a like and subscribe. And until next time, keep countercharging.